So, mi gente, this Hispanic Heritage Month, we're spotlighting the leaders who are redefining what it means to be Latino in America and to succeed authentically. From boardrooms to stages to television and podcasts, these are the trailblazers that are proving that our heritage isn't just a part of our story, it's our superpower. And the guest that I have on today, she will call me Marianita because I met her when I was a whippersnapper, young reporter at Univision. She has been a mentor, a friend, and a guiding light in those moments where not only me, but our community has needed a North Star the most. Maria Elena Salinas, known as the voice of Hispanic America, a Peabody, an Emmy, Murrow-winning award journalist who spent over 3 decades at Univision. And then she brought her talents crossing over to CBS News, to ABC. Today, she continues shaping conversations as the host of the acclaimed podcast, Cinco Preguntas, where she tackles the most pressing issues facing the Latino community with depth and with authenticity. Miss Maria Elena, I couldn't celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month and, of course, not have you on.
Thank you, Marianita. Marianita, you're still a whippersnapper to me.
So let's jump right to it. You've been called the voice of Hispanic America. How would you say, when you look at being Hispanic and being a leader, how has your heritage, Maria Elena, shaped the way that you approach leadership throughout your career?
Well, first of all, about that title, I remember once someone called me the voice of the voiceless, and my daughter soon reminded me, that's silly, Mom. There's no such thing as voiceless. Everyone has a voice, but not all have a platform to use that voice. So the best thing that we can do is provide a platform for people's voices to be heard. I think what it's meant to me is that ever since I started working in television and back in 1981, I always felt that working in Spanish language media, I was reporting to a community that I was part of. I was the daughter of Mexican Americans. I felt so much connection growing up like so many Latinos did in a bilingual household, in a bicultural household, embracing 2 different cultures, 2 different languages, 2 different traditions. And I think that's what has shaped me. And, when I think of how someone would describe me, I would always say, use whatever label you want, as long as it includes my cultural heritage, whether it's Latino, Hispanic, Latinx, Mexican American, Chicana, whatever it is. But I'm very proud of my cultural heritage because I do believe that we not only have very deep roots here, but we contribute so much to this country. We have been contributing to this country for centuries.
Absolutely. And that's why we're so proud to be hosting this conversation with the support of the future American Latino Museum. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But Maria Elena, you broke barriers, in a media world that didn't always look like you, not only in Spanish, but then in English as well, at places like CBS and ABC, like watching you, it felt like a barrier was being broken. What is one challenge that you still see Latinos facing in professional spaces today, be it media and beyond? And how do you think that we can push through it?
I do think it's an uphill battle, and I'm very happy to have had opportunities to do stories on both CBS and ABC. But like I said, it was an uphill battle. It was important to have allies, people that believe not only in you and your work, but believe in the importance of your community and your contributions. So I think, it's a constant reminder. You constantly have to be selling yourself. And we can complain about it and say, why can't we be recognized? And, why do we have to constantly fight about it? And maybe we can express that. But to be honest with you, we have to keep fighting. And I think we have to keep on knocking doors. We have to keep we have to keep reminding people that we are Americans too, that we are hyphenated Americans, and there will always be hyphenated Americans. And constantly just be reminding them of the numbers, who we are, how many we are, what we represent to this country economically, culturally, politically. And, maybe one of those messages will stick somewhere and they will begin to understand the importance of telling our stories. And now I'm talking about the media in general, not just hiring Latinos and having faces and names, because there are a lot of them out there, but it's telling our stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And when you talk about it's an uphill battle, what would you say those battles are still that exist?
I think just what I was saying, one of the battles that exists is having people in the powers that be understand why Latino stories are important and how many Latino stories should be done, and why not only immigration is not the only issue that concerns us or that interests us or that should be highlighted. I think that the perception that people in general have of the Latino community is either you know them because they're your neighbors and you live amongst them, or it's what you see in the media and what you hear from politicians. So if what you're seeing and what you're hearing is constantly negative, then we're going to be perceived as negative, and that's just not who we are. So I think that's what the uphill battle is, just trying to get our stories and get stories of success. And yes, we have a lot of trials. We have a lot of trials and tribulations that we should share. And we should share all of it. Our accomplishments, our obstacles, our mistakes maybe, but also, what we bring to the table, which is quite a bit.
And that's why we're highlighting you, a story of success that inspires us every day. You hit on something really important, and it's this idea of the misconceptions that exist. And Friends of the National American Latino Museum, actually, I remember published a report about the fact that I think around 80% of Latinos living in the US are US citizens. But if you were to ask anybody on the street, just based on what the media portrays, they would never come up with that high a number. And you're actually a representation of that. You're a Latina and you're proudly Mexican-American Chicana. You were born in Los Angeles.
Exactly.
And you represent us so well. And the fact that we have to continue to tell our stories in a way that's reflective of who we actually are as a community. Now, you've spent decades.
Mariana, I think it's important for people to get used to that, because not only are we, 65 million Latinos in this country, and 80% of us are US citizens, but we are a very young community.
Yes.
And we are the future. You know that 93% of Latinos under 18 were born in the US. And they speak mostly English. So, we are the future. We're not just the present. We're also, the future. We're going to continue to grow. And that's why it's so important for us to invest in our young people.
So talking about young people, what would you tell a young Latina professional who's looking at this conversation and feels afraid to speak up or to take up space in the workplace, not necessarily in media, but generally?
You said something in the beginning, I think, which is really one of the most important things that we need to remember. Being a Latino is our superpower. Being a Latino is our superpower, and we should never be ashamed of who we are. On the contrary, and I think what gives us that strength is that when we realize the sacrifices that our parents and our abuelitos made, so that we could have the success that we have, so that we could have the opportunities that we have. And I think just out of respect for them and out of respect for yourself, be proud of who you are and where you come from and what you bring to the table. And, and I think this is for Latinos and for all people, I think there's a lot of fear sometimes, and there's obstacles that we create in our heads, and we allow fear to paralyze us and not allow us to move forward. So, just always ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I know that that's a quote that has been adjudicated to several different people. I don't know if it was Mother Teresa or if it was somebody else, but I love that phrase. And I think it's important, because when we stop and think, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? You say, okay, take the fear out of it. What would I do? I'd go for it, which is what you do all the time, Mariana.
Always so prepared, adjudicating phrases and quotes. That's why you're the best in the business. Maria Elena, always ask any producer who has worked with her, any talent who has co-hosted with her. You're always so buttoned up in your facts. You are like a walking masterclass in good journalism. So thank you for being thorough. As you built your global career, how do you balance honoring your roots while also evolving in such a fast-changing industry? Because, it's incredible. The media industry that exists now is nothing like what existed 5-10 years ago. So what's been your secret to staying true to yourself while still, pivoting as fast as you have to be able to continue to be a relevant voice?
I think meeting people where they are. When you mentioned my podcast, Cinco Preguntas, My first guest in this season was my former co-anchor, Jorge Ramos. And we reminisced on the past, and we reminisced on that era that a lot of people say was the golden era of television, and how, both of us leaving is the end of an era. It's not the end of an era because we are personally not there. It's the end of an era because the media has changed, because people no longer sit and at dinner and wait to 6:30 to watch what's happening in the news. Now they can get it instantly, whether it's in 24-hour news channels or whether it's on their phone, on social media. So I think the important thing is to meet people where they are. I mean, I understood several years ago when I left Univision, and I said when I left, I want to continue telling stories to different audiences and different platforms. And fortunately, that's what I was able to do. And what are those other platforms? For once it was CBS, it was ABC, but it's also social media, and it's also streaming, and it's also YouTube, and it's, there's just so many outlets out there. And I think you need to meet people where they are and reach them where they are, and always remember to keep them in mind, not you.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky and blessed to have grown up with the Latino community, because we grew up together, in Spanish language media grew up together with the Latino community. So I understand them pretty well. I know them because I know myself, and I know my family, and my family is like so many other Latino families. And, I think that's the most important thing. Why do I continue to evolve? Because it's not just about working. In fact, I want to say that I'm retired. Although Jorge Ramos says if you were retired, you wouldn't be doing a podcast, which means I'm not retired. But, a lot of the things that I do are philanthropic, and I participate on boards for the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, and I have my own scholarship. So I think giving back also to that community is part of that growth, because it's empowering people, whether it's through information, whether it's through education, whether it's through, politically empowering them. I think it's something that becomes part of you when you do it for so long.
And that's why the community trusts you. It's meeting them where they are, but knowing that whether it's on a stage for a scholarship, whether it's on a podcast, or whether it's on streaming or a news network, you will get Maria Elena Salinas, just as she is, and what we've been consistently seeing, serving the community for over 30 years. So we are both very involved, speaking about philanthropic efforts, with the future National Latino Museum that will hopefully be situated on the Mall in Washington, D.C., because we deserve nothing else. And we're partnering with Friends of the National Latino Museum for this Hispanic Heritage campaign. So if you had a magic wand, la varita mágica, and you could create an exhibit about Latinos, about media or not, what story from your own journey, your community, what would you want featured in that future museum?
That's a good question. Well, for one thing, I think I would pick two sections that would be very important, and that would be food and music. Because, I think the entertainers are goodwill ambassadors for the Latino community. I think that they have been able to get that respect from people all over the world. And there's so many people in this country that love to listen to our music, that love to eat our food, but maybe don't understand who we are. And they need to understand that behind that delicious food that they eat from all of Latin America, and that music that they hear, also from all of Latin America, there are immigrants and immigrant families. And those are two sections that I would like to see. And just remind people of our roots. Yeah. It's so important. Remind people that Spanish was spoken before English in this country, 100 years before the Pilgrims came. So, we are in our country. We are, this is, the United States is, we are part of the United States is part of us. So we're as American as can be.
We're part of the official fabric of this country.
As American as arroz con frijol.
Claro que sí. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Okay, I'll try.
Okay. Maria Elena Salinas, what is one Mexican tradition that has shaped you as a leader?
Eso está difícil. I thought it was going to be fast and easy. Okay. One tradition that has shaped me as a leader. The one tradition that has shaped me as a leader is having Thanksgiving, where we include mole and arroz y frijoles.
And everybody together at the table as a family, como familia.
That way we celebrate both.
Finish this sentence for me. Being Latina means?
Being strong.
What's the biggest misconception about Latinas that you've had to fight against?
That we don't belong.
If you could design a museum exhibit about Latinos who broke barriers for our future Latino museum, what would you want featured?
I think all of the people who are grandparents who struggled so much in the fields so that we could go to universities.
I would want one on Latino journalists and have you be at the helm of it. That. Best advice que tu mamá o tu abuelita gave you about success?
From my mother, I learned whatever you do, be the best at, try to be the best, no matter what you do, what field you're in. Always try to be the best. And also, don't be a conformist.
What would you tell your younger self about embracing your name, who you are, your accent, your identity on the air as a journalist?
Be curious and continue to grow and accept everything. And as you know, I always like to say yes to everything. Although at this age, I'm wondering if maybe I should have said no once in a while.
What's the biggest challenge you see Latinos face when telling their own stories? And what is one way to overcome it?
I think one of the challenges that Latinos face when they're telling their stories is that there are people out there that don't give them importance and don't think they are important. And I think that the way you overcome that is by knowing that it is important and continue to tell your story and maybe say it a little louder and a little wider.
La confianza, that confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Last three questions in Spanish. La comida mexicana que más te gusta es?
Mexicana.
Y dentro de la comida mexicana, o sea, la comida mexicana que más te gusta es?
Chilaquiles.
Qué rico. ¿Cuál es tu canción preferida en español?
Cualquiera de Juan Gabriel.
Querida. ¿Y tu dicho favorito en español o uno que usas mucho? Un dicho o refrán.
Hay muchos. Mi mamá decía muchos dichos. Lo barato sale caro.
¿Cómo traduciríamos eso para los que no hablan español?
Es que lo barato sale caro puede significar muchas cosas. No es nada más económicamente, lo barato sale caro. Pero when you try to take shortcuts,
Yeah.
it can cost you
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Ese es uno. Y otro es, no hay mal que por bien no venga. Ese es otro.
Dos grandes refranes para vivir la vida y sobre todo para adaptarnos al cambio. Mucha gente que está viviendo momentos de cambio en este momento y que esos son dos dichos importantes. Gracias, María Elena Salinas. Me encantó. Lo barato sale caro y no hay mal que por bien no venga.
Exactamente.
Yo le doy gracias a Dios que me puso en tu camino, siempre por tu mentoría y tu ejemplo. Y sigue brillando, que te necesitamos.
Gracias, Mariana, igualmente. Y espero que disfruten todos este mes de la herencia hispana y que se sientan muy orgullosos de quiénes son y de dónde vienen.
Por eso estamos haciendo esta serie. Gracias, María Elena.